presentation.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you also for the invitation. It's like a real pleasure. It's the first time since 2 years that I'm actually doing a face-to-face presentation today, and it is not like YouTube, like streaming to YouTube actually. So kind of surprising. So welcome to the last talk. I know there is like a big pressure for me because I'm just like in the middle of this presentation and the beer event. So yeah, I know that you want probably the beer, but let's just like do this talk just before that. So welcome to the bug hunting in 5G-NR and device networks. So this presentation is about how to do some assessments on the radio side, on the core side, and also look forward with some protocol stack vulnerability. But it will not go into all the details about that. I will probably just like release some videos about that, but it will just give you some steps that will allow you, for example, to progress into this domain. So I'm Dudek Sébastien. I'm the founder of the Pentest company. You know already that I founded the company, which is called Pentest. I'm alone in this company, but sometimes people also want me to use some fancy titles like CTO, CEO. So I was like maybe thinking that I can maybe just provide in my card, business card, I'm a CTO. That means Chief Tax Officers at some point. But yeah, this is one of the things that I can just like write on my business card today. Yeah. And also, Marco didn't say it, but I was like, I did my company during the COVID time. I then also joined Trend Micro, so I'm working also with Marco on FTR, doing industrial IoT, mobile, etc. And yeah, if you're interested, I will not bother you about all these services that Pentest provides, but if you're interested about trainings in SDR, radio, etc., you can always like go to the website. So as a company which works on radio, I'm working a lot with SDR stuff and with a lot of radio analyzers. So here is just part of my stuff. You don't see the other side, which is kind of messy because there's like a lot of boxes everywhere and I don't have like a lot of space, but still you can see like part of the SDR that I'm using, and part of the SDR I'm using is also used on 2G to 5G actually. So our, as the title purpose, we will talk about 5G stuff. So I will see the evolution of mobile network in brief because I cannot talk about what happened 30 years and more than 30 years ago, but I will just like do a quick presentation. Then we will talk about how to perform assessment in radio with 5G, how to work with 5G new core network, and then look further on protocol stack vulnerability, which could be like also interesting, and then conclude. So now let's talk about the evolution. At the beginning, when some of you are probably like too young, some others knows exactly what I'm talking about with the 1G. So with the 1G, you remember the phone that was like bigger than you had. So you had these things actually. But now, in 2021, you have 5G. You have 4G actually. You have the 5G NSA that I will talk about. And normally in 2022, you will have the real 5G. But yet you just have like the transition between the real 5G and the 4G actually. So. And also, what is interesting is that, yeah, we are already in 2021. We are actually moving into the real 5G, but we are already talking about 6G. So I will not talk about 6G, but we can always like talk after that during some beers. But yeah, let's just focus on what will happen in 2022 actually. And yeah, about the differences between 2G and 4G, for example, you should probably see that there are some similitudes between, for example, 2G and 2.5G, which is GPRS, Edge, etc., and also UMTS, because UMTS use exactly the same bricks as before. And 4G is actually also the same bricks, but a little bit more evolved from 3G. But then you normally, currently, I don't know if in Italy it is the case, but in France, we are smoothly moving into 5G, and the move is actually using the 4G architecture and also putting an antenna, a 5G antenna, which will actually communicate with the 4G antenna in order to provide you the 5G. So actually, the 5G antenna you will see is called a 5G NSA, so it is a non-standalone antenna, and it will actually also be dependent of a 5G, of a 4G antenna, sorry, to be able to provide you the network, and it will reuse exactly the same networks as 4G because it is using the 4G networks in the 4G architecture at some point. But normally in 2022, you will see something like that. So, and then there will be like a clear evolution because not only the radio access will be very fast, because more efficient, because we use like better encoding, better mapping for the samples in order to provide a lot of samples over the air, but also we'll use a network which will be very scalable because the network will be virtualized at some point. So even, for example, some providers like Amazon, Google, etc., will be able, for example, to provide all the backends, which will allow you, for example, to communicate at some point. So normally, in the oldest architecture, the operators was responsible for all the stuff, all the core behind. But in the real 5G, it will be much like that. Is that the operator will be able to host some parts, and then the AWS and Google, etc., will be hosting also the same thing in order, for example, for the operator to just like do some economy. So now let's talk about the radio. And doing the 5G, I was interested to go straight to the point, go straight to the 5G essay. So I just boot a lot of devices. I boot like 6-7 devices. In here you just like see one part of it. And each of these devices are from different brands. So you can see like there's like a Samsung. It is not obvious, but there's a Samsung. There's also a Simcom. There's a Huawei, there's also an Oppo phone in here, and the other one is an LG Velvet, actually. But with all these targets are using also a different modem vendor. So some devices use Qualcomm, some others use iSilicon, some others are using Exynos. I pick just like different targets with different modems in order to see what are the differences, but also to find some vulnerability on those targets. So and the thing is that, for example, you see the card, the SIM card, which is in here, the SIMCOM card, which is in here, which is the PCI card in the middle, is something that is mostly used, for example, in IoT stuff. Generally, it is not in PCI, it is mostly soldered on the chip, but I use that because it is easy for me, for example, to plug it and to put it, for example, in a dev kit MCU, etc., in order to just like play with that. And we will see also what is interesting with that, with this kind of module. So mostly these devices are used, for example, they provide you the 5G stack, but we will see that at some point it will not provide you the full 5G stack with some targets, but also these targets can also do 2G, 3G, etc., except, for example, the module which is on the middle. And also because using, for example, a network, an operator network, spawning, for example, a network is not allowed. If you want to do that, try to isolate this network. So there's like plenty of ways to do that. I have actually a Faraday cage for that, so I can just like put all the antenna I need, and I can then perform my test without having my neighbor saying that, hey, there's like a strange signal in here, blah, blah, blah. So it will avoid you a lot of things. And also we have regulators that are always checking around what you are doing, sometimes in France, which is called the ANRF, which always pass with like with a bus and some antennas to spot some fake base station, etc. So you have to be sometimes careful about that. But still, there are some cheap ways to avoid, for example, to buy some stuff. You can always like do your homemade Faraday cage, just for example, using a simple sugar box like that, MMS box, and then on software you can just like use, for example, some attenuators. And also in the hardware, between, for example, the antenna and also the fake base station, you can use some attenuators too. So you can do that in software as well as hardware. But still, it is not certified, but it will, at some point, it will isolate I mean, it will allow you, for example, to do like an isolated environment. So yeah, the setup here with SDR in 2G looks like as follows. So you just need like 300 euro in order to run a 2G base station. But in 3G, things evolved, so also the budget evolved because you have only one software, for example, in SDR in order to allow you, for example, to spawn a 3G base station. It is OpenBTS UMTS, which only works with USP series of SDR device. But you have also other ways using femtocell, and femtocell you can also use in 4G. 4G has many other choices because still there's like a software called SS-RAN, which allows you, for example, to spawn a 4G station, which is quite good. And also you have like open area interface, which also allows you, for example, to spawn like an LTE advanced network. You have also commercial version like Amarisoft, SS-RAN with NB-IoT extension, which allows you, for example, to spawn a base station for narrowband IoT. And you have also Rodet Schwartz setup. And in 5G, now you can see that, for example, at the beginning, if you want to do that with a smaller budget with 300 euro, you can do that in 4G. But in 5G, for the moment, you don't have like many choices. You can, for example, directly use open source stuff like SS-RAN that since October allows you, for example, to spawn like a NSA non-standalone network in 5G. A little bit limited, but still it is something interesting. But the problem is that the hardware costs like a lot of money. So yeah, and if you look at commercial versions, it is exactly the same price because you will have to pay for the license and the hardware. So it is exactly the same price that you will actually spend to spawn a 5G NSA network at least. But the Microsoft version is for NSA is much higher than that because if you want NSA and SA working, you will have to spend 30,000 euros for that. So yeah, this is just for the budget information. Now, if you want, for example, to play with a 5G device, for example, an NB-IoT module, you can, for example, try to downgrade, for example, the security in order, for example, to put it in 2G, so like that you don't have mutual authentication, and so like that you can also inspect on the communication. You can see if you can just extract some secrets. But in some case, you will not have choice. Sometimes the module is only playing in 5G, and you will not have any choice but just to use 5G. But if you can downgrade it, there are plenty of manners. You can, for example, use one of the tools that I have developed, which is MononMap and MononJam, which will be also soon available in 5G, actually, because MononMap is actually mapping all the 2G, 3G, 4G base stations. But soon you will also have like the 5G NSA at least. But you have to be aware that also if you are playing with the 5G stack, as much as you have stack to downgrade, as much it will be complicated, as much resource you will have to have in order to downgrade this module into 5G. So yeah, you have to be aware about that if you want, for example, to use the 2G in order to see what is going on. So then you have to be aware that, for example, with 5G, as you have like mutual authentication, you have to use some custom USIM card. I know that a lot of people here will just like say, hey, it's a little bit cheating of using your nice SIM card in order to inspect some communication on modules, but we'll see that there's another way to get an access, for example, in core networks that could complete, for example, an assessment. So with the client, for example, I'm just like telling that I will put like a custom SIM card in order to inspect the communication in order to see if I can extract some secrets out of that to use against the endpoint, etc. But sometimes also the client say, hey, it's a little bit, you're cheating a little bit doing that because actually the attacker will not be able, for example, to do that. What's the risk of that? And I'm saying, okay, if, for example, the attacker is just taking your module and then use, for example, a custom USIM card he can, for example, just inspect for the communication and then attack your backend at some point. There's also another thing is that, for example, if the attacker has like an access to the core network at some point, for example, you know that your mobile phone is roaming at some point, so using, for example, the roaming, an attacker can just like have an access, legit access to some operator networks. So like that, he can also negotiate, for example, just spawning like a fake base station. He can just like try to negotiate to provide the secrets to the legit, I mean to the device. But we will talk about how an attacker from the outside can also get access to the core network. So that would be like some interesting stuff also in 5G. But first, let's just focus on how to actually use eSIM cards. So you can, I mean, I will not go into the detail of that, but you can actually shop this eSIM cards using this link. Or in AliExpress if you want. It is like a little bit cheaper. Like that, you can have like some secrets that you can then provide to your fake base station in order to then register the module in it, and then you can try to make the phone register. But first, you have to be aware that, for example, in 5G-SA, which was my case, is that in 5G-SA, you have to be aware about what the phone or what the module is supporting, which band actually. So this is one of the things that you have to check before you can spawn any cells, because you will see that, for example, even if the phone is supporting 5G, SA, etc., if you don't respect a lot of configuration, you will be just spending like a lot of time trying to just make the phone register or make the phone just see the network actually. So this is one of the complication, but you will see that there's like other complication. So here is like a website that also shows you some aspect of some modems. So you can just like, for example, if you are looking for some targets, you can just see that, for example, your target is actually supporting the SA mode. And so it supports just one band in here. But also you have to be aware about the configuration about the channel, I mean, the spread channel spectrum, and also the bandwidth, etc. So a lot of configuration to take in account in order to spawn a station that will be able to register your phone. And then when you go, I mean, further with all the modules or the targets, you'll see that, for example, the target is actually, I mean, on the paper and also on the commercial papers is supporting 5G SA, but it is not, because sometimes also, for example, for some phones, you have to, for example, use the MCC-MNC, which is related to the country of the phone. So, for example, for some YA phone, you have to spawn, for example, MCC-MNC, which is a Chinese one, and not the other. Sometimes you have also to program a SIM card with this kind of MCC-MNC code. So there's like a lot of things to take in account in order to, I mean, make it happen at some points. And sometimes you're feeling like you are just buying a pizza with pineapple. I mean, just like I'm just telling that for Italian people because it is like not possible. But yeah, when I just like bought, for example, the LG Velvet 5G phone, just by respecting all this specification, I just saw that, for example, my phone was unable to connect to this 5G NSA, 5G network. And I was like, shoot, why? And inspecting with 4G, actually, I could just like take the capabilities of the phone, and on the capability of the phone, you can see that the N11 was missing, and that it is an indicator that the phone actually is not doing 5G SA. Even if the commercial writing is telling you so, even if, for example, in here, K-Combos is also telling you that it's supporting the bands, because at some point, in here in the slide, the constructor for some countries just like lock also the baseband. So in China, for example, for Huawei is locking at some point also the baseband to be working on 5G SA in Europe, especially for new version. If you downgrade the version, if you are about to downgrade the version to an oldest one, you can at some point make it work. But yeah, you have to know that depending on the observation that I saw for Europe, if you want, for example, to test 5G SA target, you have to use today a Snapdragon X5X for the moment. So yeah, this is one of the constraints, for example, when I was like wanted to actually test 5G SA devices. So once you do that, you can, when 5G SA device is capable of connecting and registering to your base station, you can actually debug what is going on. You can see that also in the right, there's a nice constellation map. Microsoft is pretty weird because it is also, when you're using it as a GNB, it still has like some mention of ENB, which is like the inert B for 4G, but yeah, it doesn't matter. I mean, if you show that the configuration is 5G, and you will see also that the negotiation will be in 5G, it will be clear that you are actually spanning a 5G network. So now, once you can do that, for example, with some modules that can be used, for example, in cars, etc. The thing is that I will just like try to make register, for example, this kind of module in my base station. And so making the module going to the base station, I can, for example, then inspect on the communication and see what are the secrets that are exchanged between, for example, the network and the device. Because we know that, for example, here is just a simulation, but for example, devices are exchanging plenty of stuff. And if the devices, for example, my clients is just have, for example, some question about is the security, is the communication encrypted between the backend and the device? Because they don't. For example, automobile stuff, they don't really know what is going on between the module and the network. So actually, they want also to know exactly what is going on if the communication is encrypted. And if it's not encrypted, an attacker, for example, having access to the core network can actually also play with that, because he can spawn a fake base station, do the negotiation, as a roaming antenna, and like that, he can extract the secrets. If you're working, for example, with automobile and other devices, you will see that, for example, you will face maybe an embedded SIM card. And embedded SIM cards are a little bit painful because you can actually try to you can just like try to remove it and put your SIM card just after that. But without going into all of that, you can also sometimes just try to spot on the chip if there is like a second SIM card possible, if there's like any slot for a second SIM card. And doing so, you can just like, for example, see that there's like a slot for SIM1, and there's a slot for SIM2 in here. And in this slot, you can just like put your custom SIM card, and like that, tap some AT commands if you can do that also, because you have also a serial access. And like that, you can force, for example, the module to use the SIM card too, and like that, inspect for the communications. Now let's talk about the 5G NSA, the 5G network. And you will see, you will see why also this kind of attack, as of course, using a custom SIM card is cheating, but it's just showing a scenario where an attacker has an access. And let's now talk about that. So access to the network normally is not an easy task. You have like two ways. You have a legit way, like paying an access for an SS7 diameter 5G. So you need like to do a lot of paperwork and also give a lot of dollars. Or you have also a non-legit attacking way, where you can just like attack some exporters gateways. And this is the way that I will just like show you with some examples, and some examples that I have also found not only in my clients, but also in some challenges like the 5G cybersecurity hack challenge, that is like a good exercise to see how the 5G works and also what are the common problems, because it is like a bug bounty for 5G actually, core networks. And so in 2019, we had like a 5G cybersecurity hackathon, which was like pretty interesting, because they asked us, for example, to hack, for example, the 5G connection in order to get access to the VR glasses, and then try to impersonate, for example, some stuff in here. Because normally you have like a patient in here, you will see indirect how the patient is going on, but you can, for example, the task was like to replace, for example, the images which will be actually for example, the doctor will see in remote. So just try to do some impersonation out of that. And what was interesting is that at some points, we were looking at some vectors of attack. For example, we looked at, for example, the public IP address that was spawned, for example, by the SIM card. So like that, we just like try to see what is the range of the IP, which is, allowed. It is allocated for the operator, and like that, we just scan everything on that. We use also the legit SIM card in order to see if there's like any isolation. And of course, in this exercise, there was like no isolation at all, and actually this is one of the SIM cards that they provided. So with a SIM card, you can do like a lot of stuff, especially if this SIM card is used in M2M for M2M purposes. So generally like IoT stuff, etc. And so this SIM card, for example, with this SIM card, we could use Trustroot in order to just like spot all the gateways. Then we just, for example, with all the IPs subnets, we could just like perform an nmap on it. And we found like a lot of exported services like that. We have been able, for example, to spot some interesting service, like for example, managing services, which use only some default passwords on it. So we could just like go into that, and then we could like manipulate a lot of that. A lot of interfaces were just like configured, with default password. And this is the thing that we see also in some operators, because some operators think that as it is trusted, as for example, all the interfaces are in the core network, you see plenty of things like that, plenty of misconfiguration like that. But here in this cybersecurity challenge, it is like, the perfect exercise to see that. And what was good is that at the end of the journey, we will be able, after 24 hours, we have been able to get a root access to the MMU, which allows us to also to get the secrets in order to decrypt the communication, and also, impersonate all the things. So yeah, if you're interested about the attacks, etc., you can also, use this link. You have also a similar story. If you remember, at the beginning of this day, we were talking about the Sprint, the card, the one card that crashed because it was manipulated in remote. So this is also one of the story which is very related, for example, to the Jeep hacking by, I don't have the name now, I have a stroke, but yeah, if you look at this paper, you will see that because of the by isolation of Sprint M2M network, the hacker were able, for example, to get access to the car and control the car remotely. So yeah, this is exactly the same thing. Now let's talk about the 5G-SA. So 5G-SA, we had also a challenge where we had like some IoT stuff in here, and the IoT stuff in here we had also to try to we had to control the network at some point. We had to mess with the network at some point. So what the exercise in here, they just like give us some IP address. They give us also SSH because it was only remote this time. They don't provide us any SIM card, but we were able to just like spot some interesting range. And with this interesting range, what we've done is that we have just like scanned all the range actually. And the story is exactly like the same as Positive Technology presented also and also write about. And with that, we spotted some TCP interfaces, and with these interfaces, we could, for example, spot a login on the core network of some. It is hidden in here on some core network. It's like not a commercial but private, closed source core network in here that they needed us to actually pen test. And so we just saw that it was possible to bypass the login by just doing like a simple, a simple bypass, because just like by brute forcing the web directories, we were able to spot, for example, a page, and with this page we had some links, and with these links we were able to export all the MSIs plus the KI secrets, which are the secrets used by the SIM card. So actually we could, like for example, we could have this, the secrets used by the SIM card, and so like that we can. For example, provide a fake network. As we have the secrets of the card, we can also, for example, trap any device like that. But this is not done yet, because there's also another thing which is interested is the 5G is completely different. As I said, it uses the cloud in order to provide you services, and the services are all virtualized. And what is cool is that you have like some functions that are virtualized by the VNF, which is the virtual network functions. So you have like with that, you have like a very fast connectivity. You have a lot of applications that are featured. And what is cool is that this thing is using RESTful API. So it is not the same protocol as used before, for example, by the operators, like complex protocol in SCTP, but it uses now the web. And so as it is using another technology, like it is like a web technology, you will mostly find also web vulnerability on that. So yeah, actually it is has doing a web pen test on the core network now. So If you want to interact with the NRF, you have to know a lot of things. You have to know what is the port of the service that is actually spawning that, and also the API. So the API is public, so you can also just like pass the API for that, and and like that you can interact with it. So as you have like some access after just like pointing the interface, you can just then we develop some tools in order to parse all the specification, all the open API, because the open API also in Burp was crashing at some point. It was not able to parse the specification, so we had to do a module which will be able to do that, and then also forward all the queries to repeater in order to then play some queries, and like that we have been able to see that it didn't require any logging, any authentication in NRF. So this is by default. By default, the authentication is not enforced, and it was for this challenge, but also for some setups in one client. They weren't aware about the authentication of that stuff. So like that, as an attacker, you can, if you have that access and you know actually how to request that, you can actually just like create some networks, create some functions. You can mess with that actually, and you can leak some things. I mean, you can control everything because all the application actually are actually using that. So now, other things that could be interesting in 5G, and as in other stacks, there's like the baseband attacks, baseband vulnerability hunting, and this is much more complicated because as you know, in 2G at the time, you had like a lot of devices. I mean, these devices were much more easy to, much more easy to target, but much more easy to exploit. But now things are a little bit, complicated, but still. For example, if you are able, for example, to exploit a target, for example, the protocol stack, you can do like pretty bad stuff like trigger the silent call. You can also send some SMSs. You can do like pretty much a lot of things. And you can also have an access to the application side by, for example, bypassing the MCU. But yeah, still, you're a little bit restrained to interact with the application side, but still you can do some pretty nice stuff. And yeah. For the emulation, for the fuzzing, if you want to find vulnerability on that, you perform some fuzzing tests. You can do that also doing some manual code analysis, of course. But you can do like fuzzing via radio, which is very long. You can do emulation, or you can do also some reversing. So the preferred approach is to do hybrid. And what is interesting, for example, in GSM and GPRS, I really like, for example, for fuzzing this target because you can actually. Every frames are, you have like a lot of frames that are not authenticated, a lot of frames are not protected. So you can actually, as an attacker, without authentication, without, anything, any protection, you can send to the device some clear text frames, and like that you can maybe expect to crash the target and maybe exploit the target. So here are some layers that could be like interesting, like especially the connection management level. You have the modulability management. All the three layers are very interesting to look at because you have like some type IT, message type, but also some TLV to attack. So you can just mess around with the length and also the values that will be passed, because then you have also a parser which you trigger in order to exploit. And if you want to do some mutation generation, you have like some good tool like libmich, which was good for GSM, GPRS, but for other technology like 4G, 5G, etc., you have PikeRat, which is like now the tools to work with. But the problem with PikeRat compared to libmich is that libmich was good to enable all the elements, so like that you could crush the target, or you could just like observe like a strange behavior. But with PikeRat you have to enable all of that by hand, so you have to know a little bit how to. You have also to look a little bit on documentation in order to see how you can enable, for example, an element, for example. So yeah. For 2G GSM, you could do that, for example, with OpenBTS, which allows you, for example, with the test call feature to send directly the payloads. With VABTS, you could also modify it, and also OsmoBTS, you could modify it to send some raw payloads. But yeah, in 3G, since 3G, it is much more difficult because you have less packets that are clear text. So at some point, when you will have to exploit, for example, targets, you will have to be at some point authenticated. So still, there will be like some unencrypted frames, but there's like not a lot of things that you can actually send to the targets unencrypted. And there's also another target that was like interesting to see because Marco Grassi just like presented some stuff on VOLT. So in VOLT, he was capable, for example, to because it is SIP at some point, you can also, for example, exploit a vulnerability in order to get a remote command execution on that. So code execution on that. So actually, it was very interesting to see that because maybe also just like focusing only on the 5G frames is maybe not enough. Maybe we can also look at other services that 5G will provide, because in here for VoLTE, we can find a lot of things, but with 5G we'll have much more services, so it's really good to see what kind of services we can actually fudge. And so if you want to send raw payloads in 5G, you don't have like a lot of choice. In NSA, of course, you can use SL's run, but in SA, you have to modify because it is closed source, and it is also the same thing that Marco Grassi presented. I don't know. Marco Grassi, for example, just like presented how to fudge CDMA. So some CDMA stuff. He just like took, for example, some closed source. Commercial, for example, a system that was able, for example, to spawn a CDMA station, and he modified it in order to send some raw payload in order to exploit the targets. And in here, it is exactly the same. With Amarisoft, you have to patch LTE-NB, and then also you have to get around with the stripped binary, because now, since a year or two, the binary is now stripped. And maybe more than that, maybe 3 years. But before, like 4 years ago, it was completely, you could patch it like very simply. I still have like, the old references, and I use that, for example, to directly patch it and send some payload on that. If you want to map also the devices, because also when you target a device, it is not easy to see if, for example, your target will be like a Samsung S11, or an Apple X or something like that. You can always use the TAC, the type allocation code, in order to classify, for example, which target you are looking at. You can also use the GMSA, GSMA commercial DB, which allows you also to have like much more information about the target, because you can just provide the MEI, and like that you can see that it is this phone, so I can just like send the payload, the appropriate payload to this phone. And still, for base station, if you want to, for example, target a base station, you want to trigger a vulnerability on base station, it is much more complex because you have to work on the behavior of the base station. When you work, for example, with a brand or two, you can spot some differences on how things are sent, but it's much more difficult, for example, if you don't know the operator, what the operator is using, what technology the operator is using. And then, the EU architecture, you have to know that, for example, for the emulation, it could be like very interesting to know that, for example, your target is mostly running ARM, because ARM is easy piece to actually emulate, easy piece, because you have also to do like a lot of work on, for example, providing the context, everything. So, so you have to take in mind that, for example, if you want to learn some stuff on baseband exploitation, I consider, for example, using Exynos at some point, because Exynos, see if you have like the access of the old Samsung S6, it's perfect for, to begin. If you have the later one, it's not a problem. You will have like much more trouble to restore some context. You will have to build a context that will work, and then try to see if you can actually trigger the bug. For iSilicon, it will be like much more complicated, because at some points now the iSilicon baseband, if you want to look at the firmware is encrypted. So even if it is using ARM, the access is not easy. Some MTK devices use also ARM. Qualcomm devices, all Qualcomm devices use ARM. And you have x86, MIPS, etc. So you have to take into account what type of, how you can actually debug the stuff, how we can exploit it, and at some point you need, some emulation. So there's like something that you already know how to emulate, for example, target with killing, with unicorn, with a lot of things. So for ARM, there's like plenty of things. But for Qualcomm, yeah, 10 years ago it was easy because it was just simple ARM, and you had also something that was developed by one of my colleagues at Sogeti at the time, which was cucumber DBG, but now there's like no tools at all. I mean, there's like only like some ADA engines in order to reverse that. There's also Trace32 from 2019. You have also QEMU Hexagon for DSP6, but yeah, it is fading a little bit to emulate. It is not as easy as emulating, for example, an ARM architecture, but yeah, maybe in some years I will be able to emulate it more properly than that, but still it's like complicated. So generally what I'm doing is that, with Trace32 and also other things, and I try also to look at debug information provided by QSDM. So to do that, for example, I have to have like a DIAG access. And to get the DIAG access, you can, for example, use a module. The module generally provides you the DIAG access. But if it doesn't provide you the DIAG access, but only 80 commands, you can still look at some hidden 80 command in order to enable the DIAG access. And so like that, and especially in here, I can also enable ADB. And which is interesting is that this kind of module, in this module, you have an Android running. So in the application side, you have the Android, you have the baseband then. And so just like typing this AT command, I'm able to, to provide an ADB service on which I can connect to it, and connected to it, I can just like send some command on the module, not on the baseband, but only on the module, on the application side, and like that I can do some debugging stuff. So yeah, and you have also some similar ways with some other Qualcomm modules like AC20 from Cactel, AG25G, etc. So yeah, if you're interested about furthering on mobile, there's like plenty of reading. I have also done some reading on GSM protocol stuff, at the time. And there's like there's like a listing of good reading to actually begin on. So yeah, the conclusion is that 5G-NR is maybe complex, but it is also different. It is using some technology that we are actually using from many years. So actually you saw, for example, that now we have IP rest in the core network, which now allows, for example, for web security researcher to actually perform some pen test, because it is something that he knows, but it doesn't, you don't have to say that, yeah, of course, in the oldest technology, it was like pretty, it was pretty buggy, and you had also to send like some weird HTTP frames. Now it is web, so you can also try to find some web vulnerability on that. And you see that for 2G, from 2G to 4G, it was not very expensive to actually do some assessment on the radio and also other things. But now with 5G, it will likely be at this price because you need to afford for the hardware for that. So this is kind of sad, but maybe some constructor, some SDR constructor will probably just provide a cheaper version, which will allow you, for example, to perform some 5G stuff in the radio. But for the moment, it will be like a little bit expensive on the radio side. But yeah, attacking the core radio is a very interesting thing because I didn't talk about the slicers, which is used by other types of devices. So it is also, a mysterious, there's like plenty of stuff to discover on this side. And yeah, there's like still a lot of tools are missing on 5G SA actually. I just developed one of tools that can be interesting, but there's like plenty of tools that are missing. And that means that this area actually is like not a gold mine, but I think that there's like plenty of stuff still to discover. And we just, in here, we just see, the surface of that. So yeah, and yeah, of course, I wanted to talk, about Qualcomm. I talked about Qualcomm. Qualcomm could be like a nice target actually to FUD, but still, as you know, there's like not pretty much a lot of tools, but as it is complex, less people also look at it. So yeah, this is something that I will I will work much more closely at that. Maybe I will not find anything on that because it will be much more difficult, but yeah, still, let's get a try. So yeah, thank you very much, guys. See if you have any questions, etc. Don't hesitate also to contact me. You can also watch my YouTube channel where I can also provide much more deeper information because in here I condensated a lot of things in here, but I will go in more details about every part. But yeah, thank you very much. And if you have any questions, please ask.